It's the Beth Cahill Show. And now, here's Beth.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Beth Cahill Show. So this morning we're going to do things a little bit different than we've been doing the past 5 weeks or so, but who is counting? We're going to take a break from covering the coronavirus, and instead I want to touch on some of the hot topic stories nationally that have broke this week. And I want to start with the Joe Biden story and the sexual assault allegations that have been charged against him by Tara Reade. I'm going to discuss this case, and I also want to discuss the difference in the media coverage that this story has received versus that of the last really high-profile sexual assault allegations case, and that was the case against Brett Kavanaugh. So let's start with Tara Reade and who she is. Tara Reade was a staff assistant in Joe Biden's Senate office back in the early 90s. Tara Reade worked for Biden for about 8 months in 1992 and 1993. Her basic role was supervising interns. That's what she was in charge of in that office. And what Tara Reade claims is that Joe Biden sexually assaulted her in the Capitol Hill building in 1993. So what do we know about this claim, and you know, how credible is it? It's the question that everyone always asks. How credible is it? So here is what we know so far. There have been, well, let's back up a little bit, okay? There have been several people that have come forward to corroborate Tara Reade's story. So one of those people being her neighbor from the 1990s. Another person is one of Tara Reade's former coworkers who says that she recalled Tara Reade's story. And again, the key here is that Reade spoke of this story to all of these people that are now coming forward to corroborate it back in the 90s when it supposedly happened. So this is not her coming forward today, now that Joe Biden is running for president. These claims happened back in the 90s when she worked for his office. And these people are saying that, yes, these discussions happened back then. So Reade claims that Biden assaulted her in the spring of 1993. At that time, Reade complained to her supervisors, supposedly, again, this is all just alleged. Reade complained to her supervisors, to which she said that her job after her complaint was scaled back. And eventually, she was basically told to find a new job. So just to follow her here, she basically says she gets assaulted. She files a formal complaint to her supervisor. She then says her job was scaled back, and eventually she was basically fired for it. A call surfaced about a week ago that seems to corroborate this timeline as well. And this call was allegedly made by Tara Reade's mother back in 1993. Tara Reade's mom called in to Larry King Live. Listen to what she says here.
San Luis Obispo, California. Hello.
Yes, hello. I'm wondering what a staffer would do besides go to the press in Washington. My daughter has just left there after working for a prominent senator and could not get through with her problems at all. And the only thing she could have done was go to the press, and she chose not to do it out of respect for him.
Or she had a story to tell, but out of respect for the person she worked for, she didn't tell it.
That's true.
So if we were to rewind and go back to about a year ago, when 8 women, including Tara Reade, spoke to the media about Biden having a habit of inappropriate behavior and inappropriate touching, that happened. I know there wasn't much coverage around it, but there was about 8 people that spoke to the media about this. Look it up. I mean, this happened. And at that time, Tara Reade was part of that group of 8 women. And at that time, she said that Biden had touched her inappropriately. Then last month, Reade said that the alleged assault happened. She describes the story as that the alleged assault happened when she was delivering Joe Biden a gym bag. And at that time, that is when this took place in the basement of the Capitol. She said, and I quote, "He was whispering to me and trying to kiss me while asking me if I wanted to go somewhere else." Reade says that she remembers wanting to say stop, but doesn't know if she said it or just thought it because she had frozen up. So that's her story. it's a lot more graphic than that. I'm not going to go into it, but Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe did do an interview on that, and she can go into all of the details on that story. So after this happens, Reed says that she filed a police report in the Senate, and that at that point she complained to supervisors. We talked about that earlier. Then she was retaliated against. So Joe Biden now, after a month of complete silence on this topic, besides his campaign, they addressed it. His campaign put out a statement, but Joe Biden has been silent on this topic. He wasn't on the Sunday shows. He wasn't asked about it by the media. I mean, up until the interview that he gave on Friday morning, Donald Trump was asked more about this assault than Joe Biden was asked about it. So Friday morning, Joe went on to MSNBC on the Morning Joe show where Mika Brzezinski interviewed him on this topic. I want to play a clip for you. It's a lengthy clip. It's about 2.5 minutes, but it's a clip that I think is important to play. So listen to this clip here.
Given the fact that you have said in the past that if a woman goes under the lights and talks about something like this, we have to consider that the essence of this is real. Is the essence of what she is saying is real? Why do you think she's doing this?
I'm not going to question her motive. I'm not going to get into that at all. I don't know why she's saying this. I don't know why after 27 years, all of a sudden this gets raised. I don't understand it. But I'm not going to go in and question her motive. I'm not going to attack her. She has a right to say whatever she wants to say, but I have a right to say, look at the facts, check it out, find out whether any of what she says is asserted or true. And based on the investigations that have taken place so far, to the best of my knowledge, by two major papers. They interviewed dozens of my staff members, not just senior staff, but staff members, I'm told. At least that's what they said. And yes, nobody, this was not the atmosphere in my office at all. No one has ever said anything like this.
But, Mr. Vice President, as it pertained to Dr. Ford, everyone wanted, high-level Democrats said she should be believed, that they believed it happened. You said if someone like Dr. Ford were to come out, the essence of what she is saying has to be believed, has to be real.
No.
Why?
No, what I
Why?
said, it has to
Why
be.
Is it real for Dr. Ford, but not for Tara Reid?
Because the facts are that, look, I'm not suggesting she had no right to come forward. And I'm not saying any woman, they should come forward. They should be heard. And then it should be investigated. It should be investigated. And if there's anything that is consistent with what's being said, and she makes the case or the case is made, then it should be believed. But ultimately, the truth matters. The truth matters. It's period. I fought my entire life to change the whole notion of the law and the culture around sexual assault. And I fought to strengthen and protect the process for survivors.
I don't know whether these allegations are true. Nobody but Joe Biden and Tara Reid know that. Maybe, there's a file sitting somewhere in Capitol Hill with Biden's Senate records in it. At this point, Biden is not going to let that become unsealed. Tara Reid is calling for them to basically unseal those records where she's saying that complaint would be sitting. But beyond that, we have Tara Reid saying one thing and we have Joe Biden saying another. And the rest of us are just here to basically look at the information and decide from there. And the information is, what we've discussed. There's been several people that say Tara Reid told them about this when it happened back in 1993. Her brother, her mom, her neighbor, and her former colleague. And there's actually been two additional people to come forward to say that, yes, she told them at the time that the assault happened as well. There was actually, this is, kind of an odd story, but a friend of Tara Reid who says that she's a Democrat, not Tara Reid, but says that the friend is a Democrat, and that she also intends to vote for Joe Biden, regardless of this story. But she did come forward and says that she believes the story because Tara Reid told her this story at that time. So those are the basic facts of the situation. You can make decisions based on, what you've been given and the information that's made available to us. And up to this point, that's about what we have. So one thing, though, that's not really up for debate is the double standard that we are seeing in how this is covered. It really shouldn't surprise me anymore in the blatant hypocrisy if you are a Democrat or a Republican, how you are covered in the press. But somehow it still always surprises me. I don't know why, but it does. I still am surprised every single time. It seems to me that this believe all women slogan that the Democrats came up with, the Me Too movement came up with, that it only refers to believing all women if they're not accusing a Democrat or a high-profile Democrat at that. So let's go back to 2018 when Brett Kavanaugh was nominated to the Supreme Court. He was truly a nomination that was really going to be hard for, people on the left or liberals to oppose based on his record and based on his reputation. Both were outstanding. So whether you agreed with his policy positions or his, written positions, that doesn't matter. That's another story, and it's actually irrelevant because, as everyone tells us all the time, elections have consequences, right? Presidents get to pick these nominees, and that's one of the reasons why presidential elections are so incredibly important, the Supreme Court. So when Brett Kavanaugh was nominated, Democrats were going to have a hard time just based on the merits alone opposing this nomination. So then you have Christine Blasey Ford, who comes forward and she says that Brett Kavanaugh tried to rape her when she was in high school. What happens next? The media and the Democrats do what the media and the Democrats do, and they took the accusation as if it were absolute truth. Absolute truth. There was no question about this. Even though Christine Blasey Ford couldn't provide any evidence that she had ever even met Brett Kavanaugh, she couldn't remember how she even got to the event where he allegedly raped her, how she got home, or even whose house she was at. She named 4 witnesses to reporters that were supposedly at the house that night that were supposed to support her claim, and they didn't. They didn't support it. They said they couldn't remember. Keep in mind, one of those people who were supposed to corroborate her story was a very good friend, Leland Kaiser. Leland Kaiser went on to get, pressured by outside sources to change her statement to say that she remembers Christine Blasey Ford talking to her about this at that time. Leland Kaiser didn't fall to the pressure, and her statement remained the same. And that statement, again, did not corroborate those events. So over the next week or so, before the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, thousands of articles were written on this. Cable news aired this story around the clock. You couldn't get away from this story. Christine Blasey Ford became a hero and a very sympathetic victim. And the media, they made sure to paint her that way regardless of whether or not there were gaps in her story. Again, I don't know whether this happened. Nobody knows whether this happened or not. Same as the Joe Biden Tara Reade situation. Nobody knows but them. I'm only pointing out the absolute hypocrisy that we are now seeing from the Believe All Women crowd. Because what that really meant all along, as we are seeing now, is believe all women unless they are accusing a Democrat. They believed far weaker accusations coming from Christine Blasey Ford than the ones coming from Tara Reade. They believed them. And this is going to be the problem. Well, it's the problem for Democrats now, and it's going to continue to be the problem for Democrats and for Joe Biden. They have boxed themselves in to this garbage slogan about believing all women. Because now those same people that said fanatically believe all women, we must believe them all, are now saying, no, I believe Biden. You can't have it both ways. You can't say on one hand, believe all women unless they accuse Joe Biden, and now we're going to say we believe Joe Biden. And isn't that really saying, if you're saying I believe Biden, isn't that really saying Tara Reade is lying? And if we learned anything from the Me Too movement, we learned that according to the left and the movement itself, you cannot question any woman's story, ever. Those are the rules. And they made those rules for the rest of us. And now they don't want to play by those rules. And of course, they don't want to, and they shouldn't have to. Well, they should actually, they should have to, but of course they're not going to want to because those were BS rules to begin with. Everyone deserves due process. Whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, man or woman, the accuser deserves to be heard. And the accused deserves their due process. That's the way it should be, whether we're talking about Brett Kavanaugh, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, or anyone who came before, or anyone who will come after. That is the way the process should work. And that is why this Joe Biden accusation is going to haunt the Democrats, because it puts their hypocrisy on full display for the American people to see. I mean, there is most certainly going to be more on this topic for months to come. It's going to be something that is, covered endlessly, and we'll be here to cover it. We're going to be here to cover it as the story develops and as more comes to light on this topic. But for now, I do want to move on to another story that broke this week, and that's the story of General Michael Flynn, President Trump's former national security advisor, and he was actually the director of defense intelligence for former President Barack Obama as well. But in order to give this story the attention that it deserves, I want to start with, from the beginning. General Flynn is an American war hero. He served his country well. Flynn's military career is one that is worth celebrating and one that deserves a great service of gratitude from the American people. So I want to start there because what happened next to General Flynn after he became President Trump's national security advisor was an absolute miscarriage of justice. Michael Flynn was charged with lying to the FBI, where he eventually pled guilty to that. This happened in the early weeks of the Trump presidency. I mean, basically right after inauguration, this story happens. But this week, new internal FBI documents have been unsealed that sheds a new light on this story. These documents show that Peter Strzok, who you may remember from the Russian collusion investigation, he was one of the main faces of it. This same Peter Strzok ordered the investigation of Flynn to remain open even after it was slated to close due to a lack of derogatory information. So translation, the FBI was closing the case because they didn't have anything to charge Flynn with, and then Peter Strzok intervened. So that's eyebrow raising to begin with, right? They bring Flynn in because they want to know Flynn's contacts with the Russian ambassador in order to get to the Russian collusion story that we now know was a colossal waste of time and a waste of taxpayer dollars. But this is how it all starts, right? This is the beginning of the Russian collusion story, and it starts with Flynn. So they bring him in. They want to know his contacts with the Russian ambassador, Kislyak at the time, and that's what they're wanting to talk to him about. Then they realize there's nothing really there. They're getting ready to close the investigation, and then Strzok steps in. Now, add on top of that this week there were more internal documents that show that top FBI officials discussed on handwritten notes, their own notes that they wrote themselves, their motivations for interviewing Michael Flynn. These individuals openly questioned if their goal was to get him to lie so that we can prosecute him or to get him fired. Those were their notes. Should we get him to lie or so we can prosecute him or get him fired? The memo appears to be basically they were weighing the pros and cons of the different paths that they could pursue, right? Both paths, I might add, have General Flynn either prosecuted or fired for violating the Logan Act. The Logan Act, which has never been prosecuted before. So this shows that they weren't in pursuit of justice. They were in pursuit of setting up General Flynn, an American war hero, who was the national security advisor to the President of the United States of America. Now, even if we say that we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, let's say that we're going to give all of those FBI officials the benefit of the doubt and say that that was not their motive, which it appears that's almost impossible to say, but let's say it anyway. Don't you think that when you're in the FBI and you're dealing with someone of that statute, someone that has served our country well and now serves the President of the United States, that you're going to go into an investigation like that being extra cautious, maybe being extra careful that you're getting it right? Because if this goes wrong, you've now gotten it wrong about someone at this level? I mean, if top FBI officials can do this to the National Security Advisor, what chance do any of us really have? It's one of the scariest cases that I have ever seen. And there are supposed to be 11 more pages coming. 11 more pages of incredibly damning information. This is why people have such a mistrust in government. I mean, it's stories like these that honestly, they keep me up at night. And honestly, right, left, center, independent, I don't care what you are. This is a story that deserves to be told and listened to by everyone on every political side. And Michael Flynn deserves his life back. I mean, to give you some perspective on this man, this has been going on for 3 years. The man has yet to be sentenced. He lost his house, basically went bankrupt trying to pay for the legal fees. His reputation was ruined. This was a war hero that was then deemed a traitor. I mean, the worst name someone like him could be called. And last week, the day this story broke about the FBI and what appears to now be a setup of Michael Flynn, he tweeted out a picture of an American flag. This is the guy whose life our government agencies ruined. And this is the man they wanted us to believe was a Russian asset, a traitor to our country. This story and what happened to General Flynn is a national disgrace. President Trump was asked this week about this, and here's what he had to say.
Mr. President, can we ask you about General Flynn?
Yeah.
Are you going to pardon him? This is what you tweeted back in December 2017. I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the Vice President in the FBI.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that he lied to the Vice President in the FBI?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, sure. When I looked at what they did to him, they tormented him. Dirty cops tormented General Flynn. General Flynn is a fine man, 35 years or so in the military. You don't get to be where he is by being bad, that I can tell you. And then right at the beginning of the administration, the dirty cops came in. And you see the notes, Jim. I mean, whether you're on our side, that side, whatever. I mean, I assume let's all talk about fairness. What they did to General Flynn, and by the way, to Roger Stone and to others, was a disaster and a disgrace. And it should never be allowed to happen in this country again. And what I really hoped, because CNN tormented him, in all fairness, I really hope to see, because they haven't been doing it, and I appreciate your question, I hope to see that CNN will not even apologize, which they should, but just cover it fairly, because he's in the process of being exonerated. If you look at those notes from yesterday, that was total exoneration. These were dirty, filthy cops at the top of the FBI, and you know the names better than I do, and they were dishonest people. Now we have to see what's going to happen. But General Flynn was treated like nobody should, and I'm not talking about generals, I'm saying like nobody in this country should be treated.
So
and they did it right at the beginning.
So guys, that is it for me today. I am unfortunately out of time. I wanted to talk more about that, but we will be back at it next week, same time, same day. Stay safe out there, and thanks again for listening.
This has been the Beth Cahill Show. If you have any feedback for Beth or would like to suggest a future topic or guest for the show, email beth@thebethcahillshow.com. That's Beth at thebethcahill, spelled CAHILL, show.com. Tune in again next Saturday morning at 9 for more of the Beth Cahill Show, right here on AM 1590. The Answer.